Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody out in social media land, TV land. Welcome to Taboo Talk with Ray and Steve. I'm Ray Amanat in sunny Port Richey, Florida, and I'd like to invite my co host, Mr. Steve Reed, somewhere in an undisclosed location in a safe house, waiting to peep his head out to see if the coast is clear. Steve, welcome to the
Oh,
show. And do you believe what the heck is going on in our country this week?
well, Ray, I'm just glad that I'm in the padded safe house today because there's a lot of lunacy that's going on these days. It is absolutely insane. Um, I, j- I'm almost speechless.
I am. I'm not speechless. I kind of want to talk a little bit about everything, but let's get to today's topic, which it is a taboo topic because a lot of people don't want to talk about this issue. Today's show, we will be discussing mental health topics, including non-suicidal self-injury. Our guest will be Miss Lori Vann with the Institute for Non-Suicidal Self-Injury that offers training events for schools, treatment centers, and businesses, along with offering online support groups, books, and coaching. Welcome to the show, Lori. Thank you for taking your time to join us on Taboo Talk.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
Lori, can you tell us a little bit how you got started with working in the mental health realm?
Well, I mean, it really goes back even to elementary school, where a lot of my friends would come to me with their problems and things going on. I was able to listen, throw out some different ideas, different perspectives on things. And then it seemed to work. None of them came back to me angry. So I thought that was a good sign. It was just an interest, and just over then the years in middle school, different vocational tests said this is the path for you. High school took those psychology classes, and it's like, yeah, this is where I'm supposed to be. So it just continued on. College excelled in it, and it's just a passion of mine.
So, Lori, question for you: what exactly is non-suicidal self-injury? What is it, and who's doing it?
It goes by a lot of names. Some people may hear it called self harm or self injurious behavior. One of the early terms that we do not use anymore is self mutilation. And how I simply define it as is the intentional infliction of harm on one's body, usually for some kind of emotional reason. And the real key part there is that it's intentional, like the person is knowingly doing this to their body, inflicting some type of pain. It's an avoidance type behavior. Like some people go grab a bottle, or they grab some pills, or they go game for 10 hours or whatever it is, but this is just their way to work through their emotions.
So,
So
okay,
the guy that says, "If you leave me, I'm gonna hurt myself or I'm gonna kill myself." A lot of the times, and you hear kids doing this because they're seeking attention. Is that pretty much kind of the same thought process that you're talking about?
Well, there's definitely a correlation with self-injury and suicide, where over 60% of people that have self-injurious thoughts or participate in those behaviors like cutting, burning, hitting, all of that, they do have suicidal ideation or a history of attempts. And over 60% is a pretty significant number to pay attention to. The attention piece, it's it's being really cautious with it, because there are some that are doing as a sort of this fake, like I'm trying to manipulate you in some way. But I would really strongly encourage people not to automatically make the assumption, because for some people that engage in self-harm, it is their cry for help. Like they are desperate to have help, and they just don't know how else to convey it, so they resort to those methods.
Lori, do you find that if somebody is abusive growing up, and let's say they have a small child, I've heard stories over the years of people that take a cigarette and put a cigarette out on their child or do some other physical harm. Do you find that those people are people that had unresolved childhood issues of self-mutilation? No, you told me I'm not supposed to use that, of self-injury. Okay, do you find that those are some of those same patterns, or are they associated? Are they different?
There's a couple of possibilities. Oftentimes, when I encounter individuals with a history of self injury, and to date I've had direct contact with over 575 cases, most times they're more on they've been victimized
Okay.
in some form or fashion. It's not saying that I haven't had those that have been more on the perpetrator side of it, but it tends to lean where someone has been a victim of physical, psychological, verbal, sexual abuse, and they've just learned that if they have a problem, they just take it out of themselves. If they messed up, they punish themselves because that's what was role modeled for them. Uh, but to an important point to add is anytime someone has had trauma in early childhood, the ramifications for it are pretty serious, including that they may become a perpetrator, or they may become a victim, or they may end up in the legal system in some way.
So you think it's really coming out of the, for sake of a better term, out of being bullied or out of that world of abuse and victimization?
It's not 100% kind of thing, but I would say for those that I've worked with, at least 70% of them had a history of verbal or emotional abuse.
Okay, that's pretty significant.
Now, percentage on history of physical abuse, sexual abuse, that varies a little bit more, somewhere probably in the 30 to maybe 40 percentile for those two, but emotional and verbal, hands down, are the number one risk factor with it. And if you think about it, if you're told you're a piece of trash all the time and you're not valued and you're not treated well, then why would you treat your own body correctly? But there is hope. Like if there are interventions, just because a kid was exposed to this does not mean that there's not hope for them and they can't, change and have a happy, healthy life.
So Ray, how do you relate to this based on your story of having been bullied and then transforming
Well,
and morphing?
you're hitting a lot of buttons just talking about this. Laura, you don't know much about me or what my story is, but at one point I was looking at suicide as a way of getting attention, and I got it from my dad to pull me out of an environment and give me a second chance at wanting to live. Kids, based on their environments that they grow up in and what they're exposed to, whether it's drugs. So can drug use or alcohol use also be a form of self-injury?
Yes,
Or
it's a little bit on that controversial side, but in my opinion, self-injury, or rather substance abuse, really is a form of self-injury. It's just the scars are internal on your organs instead of outwardly visible on your skin. I mean, unless you're doing intravenous drug use. But and that's part of the thing is that we have lots of discussions. We've become more understanding of substance misuse and abuse, but self-injury is sort of that final frontier of taboo topics, but there's so much of a correlation with substance.
right. I mean, for me, I was not exposed to drugs, alcohol. I wasn't exposed to um, gangs, in certain environments that I would say, okay, I don't have much of a family at home, so let me join a new family. And then, if I'm not happy, kids can become prey to being groomed into trafficking, and then they hurt themselves because there's no way out based on that situation for them. Me, it was verbal, physical abuse at school with severe bullying, and at home with my mom. And my parents were divorced, and I just more or less said, "Dad, if you don't do something, you're not going to see me again." And that's where he took the steps to fight for custody over me and get me out of that environment and get me the help I needed to flourish and succeed in life. But there's a lot of kids that are out there that they don't have that lifeline to go out to and get that kind of help. So, this topic is pretty much hitting real close at home to me.
Yeah.
Steve? Back to you, Steve. We can't hear you.
Yeah, that's because I muted myself. Anyway, anyway, we'll just keep going. So, Lori, your organization is Vann and Associates, and you're based in North Texas, but are you restricted to just North Texas, or do you work with clients around the country?
Well, for the counseling part, I can only counsel those that reside in the state of Texas, but for the coaching, I'm able to do that internationally because coaching doesn't have a license tied to it. Counseling does. There are differences between the two of them, but to answer your question, no, I am not limited to the state of Texas.
No, so what's the difference between coaching and counseling from your experience?
Well, with counseling, to call yourself a counselor, you have to have an advanced degree, a master's or a PhD, PsyD, rather, and you have to take licensing exams. You have to do internships. And with that license, you are held accountable to a state board who makes you go through continuing education credits, that makes you go through background checks. There is all sorts of stuff involved. And as a supervisor for interns that are trying to become fully licensed, Texas, I think, tries to do a pretty good job of making sure the right people are counselors. And you can also use insurance for the visits because counselors can diagnose, and that's what an insurance company wants, to pay the bill. With coaching, there's no license, there's no real true accountability with it. I mean, there's certification programs, but those, you're not really being held towards a board. There's not an ethics test that you take. There's not a national exam. Insurance will not cover coaching. You cannot diagnose, and you're not supposed to use counseling therapeutic tools in a coaching session. So to me, coaching is a lot more direct. It's a lot more like, here we are, here's a problem, boom, 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 very focused, very collaborative in nature. You don't get into trauma histories with it. And I think it has a whole lot of benefits.
Ray, what you got?
If our viewers that are watching right now know somebody who might be engaging in self-harm, what are some suggestions that you have that they can do? Because it is kind of walking a tightrope as far as this person might be reaching out, but is there an embarrassment that goes along with it as well?
Yeah. I always encourage individuals, try to become educated before you approach an individual so that you're familiar with some of the language or terminology, but also you're not coming from a place of just, I have no idea what's going on here. It also provides an opportunity for you to do a little check-in with emotions to make sure you're not being reactionary in nature, which in turn would only shut down the individual. And for resources, that's where the Institute for Non-Suicidal comes in, is that we have a lot of free resources. There is the YouTube channel. It's under the Lori Vann LPC-S, but there is a dedicated playlist on there for self-injury information. There is a TikTok account. No, I do not dance. I'm just saying that it's not happening. And there's also an Instagram account that's Institute for NSSI. And I film, quick little video tips on that, things to do, not to do. And there's a private Facebook group as well. In addition to the first book, The Caregiver's Guide to Self-Injury, that's available through the Institute or through the Vann Associates shop page as well. Key things for actually to say or not to say. First and foremost, don't come with assumptions. Don't come with accusations. Don't come from an emotional place. And yeah, that's challenging. It's one of the reasons I picked the cover of the book the way I did, because typically with parents, you have the dad that's angry. It's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're doing this. And the mom is like, oh my gosh, my baby is hurting herself. And you approach that individual with emotions and they're going to shut down. They're going to feel guilty. They're going to feel shame. They're going to feel all sorts of stuff. And they're probably not going to be honest with you. So one thing that happens a lot is someone will say, well, just stop it. Well, just don't do it. And I've even come across professionals that make that mistake. What you have done with that statement, as innocent and understanding as it is that you've said, I have no idea about self-injury. I really do not understand this, because the person that hears the comment is going, well, thanks, Einstein. Wow, that is a freaking brilliant piece of information you just gave me. Wow, because I never thought about just not doing it. So that's probably my number one, is avoid saying anything along those lines of just stop it, just don't do it, because that's just really damaging.
I 100% agree. I had a close friend of mine that, suffered from mental health issues as far as bipolar depression that I didn't know a lot about. And I'm like, well, just get out of your funk. Just knock it off. And until I did more research to understand more about it, to learn how to better handle or talk to them, I was as clueless as most people were. And yes, you want to get that education for dealing with whatever type of mental health issue a family member or friend might be going through.
Yeah. And so, Lori, on a lighter side, what you're saying is, you may have seen the video. I wish I had it queued up and I could share it. But a video from about 40 years ago, when Bob Newhart was a counselor or a therapist, and a woman comes into his office and she has a problem that she's afraid of being buried alive in a box. And his form of therapy was stop it. That's it. That's it. This is a 5-minute video. So what you're saying is that generally doesn't work.
No.
Okay.
I mean, because think about it. How many people have gone to someone that's struggling with drinking and they go, well, just don't drink. Like, just don't go to the bar. Yeah. Just don't buy it. Just, stop after one drink. Yeah, that's effective.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had a client that I was working with, a husband and wife, several months ago, and they would get together with his family members, cousins and so forth, and every weekend, and he would always overconsume the alcohol. And I gave him a challenge. I said, why don't you measure how much you're drinking? Now, it wasn't an addictive thing for him, so he wasn't compelled, but I made him a challenge, and his wife was there, and I said, put a number or decide ahead of time how much you're going to drink. Are you going to drink 1 beer, 5 beers, whatever the number is? And he put some coins or some beans or something in one pocket. And when he had a drink, when he took 1 bottle of beer or 1 can of beer, he moved the coin from one pocket to another. And he determined he was going to drink no more than 4 beers that day, instead of his normally more than a dozen. And at the end of the day, he only drank 3. But what he did was he replaced the alcohol with spending time with his wife and his kids. And his kids absolutely adored that time. So that was his incentive. But that wasn't a chemical issue. That wasn't something that was an imbalance, a physiological issue. That was a choice that he made. So, how often do you see things where there are chemical imbalances or obsessive or addictive choices that people are making versus just I want to have attention? What do you think is the balance there?
When it comes to self-injury, I would say the vast majority of individuals are pretty secretive about the behavior to the point where most people have done it for years before it's discovered. So the person that goes out and is like, "Oh, look at what I did over the weekend," I would say that's more in the minority of the cases. Um, but even then, I would throw in this little caveat that if someone feels they have to do that to get attention, that's sad. That merits treatment. That merits, like, they need to have some kind of intervention in their life if they feel like really that's the only way that you can get people to respond to you is by doing something like that. So while the vast majority when it comes to self-injury and even with substance misuse too, they're more secretive type behaviors. It's usually when the behaviors become out of control, or in self-injury I see people that just they're tired of covering it up. And there's a part of them that, whether maybe consciously, probably unconsciously, they stop trying to actively cover it up. And there's that part of them, it's like, I sort of hope someone does notice. I'm not going to tell myself, I'm not going to like, hey, help me. But hey, if someone happens to discover it, I think I'm at that place, but I'm too scared to ask for help. I'm too ashamed. I'm too, and some in denial about it. And I think that's one of the things we see in all unhealthy coping skills is, for some, there's a level of denial and there's a level of shame and a level of guilt and a level of just whatever the emotion might be.
What do you think are some of the triggers that are going to start people in that direction?
For self-injury, and would note for the age part too, because a lot of times people assume this is just a teenage girl thing. It's so not. This behavior starts in elementary school. And I would say that when I've tracked it, probably at the last time I tracked it, it was around 40% started at age 12 or younger, with 10 being the most common age of onset within that group. But I've had kids, now usually there's a history of abuse in the household. They start at 3, 4, or 5 years of age engaging in self-injurious behaviors. But I also have over 10% that they started at age 18 or older. And I have a
Wow.
women's self-injury support group, and the average age for the women are probably in their 30s to 40s that participate in that group. So I do want to really make sure to dispel, that image or that idea. But in the book, I collect over 35 reasons why people self-injure. And the number one by far is that the emotional pain is so bad. It's so uncomfortable. They need to have the release. They need the distraction. They need an emotional purge of sorts, because it's easier to deal with the physical pain than the emotional pain.
Wow. Laurie, we need to take a pause for a commercial break. So, right along with this topic of discussion, Ray, why don't you share with us some things about Heroes in Action and some of the things that you are doing to help people in their self-confidence and getting past some of their issues?
So the reason why I founded Heroes in Action was to go to schools and give kids the opportunity to come up with solutions that I didn't have when I was growing up. I've written the book Bully, Victim, or Hero and The Adventures of Mushy the Martian, a children's book series, to be used as tools based on the age groups to help parents and teachers work with kids and coming up with healthy solutions. When I do my presentations, I don't focus on the word bully. I focus on what it means to be a hero for yourself and a hero for others that might not know how to be heroes for themselves. I'm a speaker, I'm a trainer where I go out in the public and we offer all of our services for free, and we're funded based on donations that get sent to us to continue our mission. We've been at it since about 2008, and of course, with COVID, it kind of slowed us down or shut us down a little bit. We're back up to trying to get out into the public and help people deal with overcoming their fears, and all kinds of anti-bullying or violence prevention training seminars. So we have programs for kids in schools. We deal with domestic violence and workplace violence as far as offering presentations. You can get a hold of us through our website. Oh, that's of course Mushy the Martian, our mascot, that is available for birthday parties and grand openings for businesses, whatever you're interested in. But Mushy is a positive message for kids. You can go to our website, heroesinaction.us. Email me at ray@heroesinactionnow.org. All my books are available through our website or Amazon and Barnes & Noble or other online book sales. Lori, I kind of wanted to bring you back in. There's so many parents that are embarrassed, or so many kids that they don't want the schools to know that my child is crazy or sick or something's wrong with them, or the kids don't want to have that stigma of, Mom, I don't want to go to a psychiatrist, I don't want to go to a counselor, I don't want to go to a social worker, because what if kids find out about that? It's my self-image, and that gets them to not want to seek the help that they need. How do you deal with that?
It's an interesting mix, because I've come across a lot of students that they've wanted the help, but it's been the parents that have been the hang up, and they're more worried about their social status and image. And that's really unfortunate. I think is probably one of the reasons their kids are having some of the problems they are. It's been a very interesting shift in the last several years. And if there are silver linings to COVID, this is one of them, is that there's been more discussion about mental health and the need for discussions about mental health and intervention because of COVID and the lockdowns and all of the detrimental impacts of the lockdowns, that it's really brought more people into counseling for the first time ever, adults and students alike. And it's been destigmatizing. But I think you start with honest conversations of just starting with, okay, well, tell me what you understand about counseling. Tell me what questions you have about it. And for a parent part, if you have questions yourself and you understand it, go interview a counselor. There's so many resources out there to do that. And it's also challenging your own beliefs about it, like, but why do I believe that? Is that because that's the generation I was raised with? Is there something that maybe I don't know and understand? But if you don't know the answer to something, please don't BS it. Like, please just don't make up something, because you will lose so much credibility in your kid or teenager's eyes, because they're pretty savvy and they can pick up when their parents aren't telling them the truth. And this generation, more than any other generation I have seen, has the BS detector, and they will shut you down. I would also note an interesting trend because of TikTok. Good and bad social media. You have more kids that actually are saying they have diagnoses and wanting to be part of the crowd, because so many people have been into hospitals or gone through treatment that it's become sort of the chic thing to do. And you have some individuals that are seeking treatment that actually may not really need it or not need that level of care. But again, it's a whole discussion to have. And you know what? If a student is saying, hey, I think I want to talk to someone. Go ahead. Let them talk to someone. Let the professional figure out if they need it or not.
I've had a lot of kids that I've come across in Florida that it's not them talking. It's I know it's their parents talking, but for the child to say, "I have anxiety," and this is a child. This is an elementary school child that is. I didn't even know what anxiety was when I was in elementary school, and now kids are self-diagnosing themselves that I have this, I have that. With what I do with bullying, no, I cannot stop bullying. Bullying is always going to be around. There's always going to be violence. So even though there's a lifetime risk of self-injury, you've stated approximately 30% in the U.S. Why should a business owner care about this type of behavior? How it functions with their businesses.
Yeah. And it's a really important question to ask because a lot of people go, okay, well, I'm not a parent. This doesn't matter. Or I'm a business. I have adults that are employees. And why does it matter? Well, again, to go back to adults self injure, but this is also carrying it out into employees have families. And when a family member is really struggling, that means your employee is struggling. And that means that your employee might need some resources and need some help in order for them to stay in the workplace so that they don't have to go on FMLA. Or if you have an employee that's really struggling, helping them feel supported to have those resources so that they don't have to go on short-term disability. Because we understand employee retention is a really big issue right now. There are not enough good employees to go around to fill the jobs that we have available in America. So what employees are looking for are businesses that actually have something in place that show that they care about the employees' well-being. And employers might go, oh, I can't afford it. That's too expensive. I would challenge you to figure out how much does it cost you to hire and train and get them up to speed a new employee. Because when you start to do the numbers, I think that you're going to see it costs you a whole lot more financially and possibly reputation-wise in the community to not have some type of resources available.
All right, that's interesting you say that because in my coaching practice, I work with a lot of executives, but I'm starting to do more and more things where I'm doing employee coaching as well to help them stay in balance, whether it's in balance at work or maybe they've got some things that they're dealing with at home and they don't know what to do, how to balance the different things. I was joking with a client not too long ago, and she seemed to be a little on the stress side. I said, "So why don't you just plan on having your time of worry to be Saturday morning from 9:30 to 10, maybe 10:30?" And she looked at me and she says, "So you're telling me I can't worry the rest of the week?" I said, "Exactly. Just plan your worry time for a half an hour or an hour on Saturday morning, Sunday afternoon, Tuesday night, whatever, and just go on with life." Now, I'm not trying to minimize the stresses they're dealing with, but sometimes we worry about things that we don't really need to worry about. And that worry can translate into something a little bit more intense. So, are you finding when somebody is going through a crisis in their life, and let's face it, the divorce rate is absolutely horrendous. 50 years ago, the divorce rate was insignificant. Nobody got a divorce, but they kept the problems swept under the carpet. They didn't deal with the problems. Today, they openly deal with the problem, sometimes too openly dealing with the problem, like on TikTok or on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, those kinds of things. And then they get their tribe, so to speak, that comes along beside them and says, "I'm there with you, go for it, and you need to do it," and so forth. So are you finding that the children that are involved in those scenarios, are you finding them to be more prone to self-injury, or are you finding the spouse that doesn't want the divorce or is feeling abused? Is that one of the side effects of some of the problems going on?
Yeah, there's so many different things that go with what you're talking about. So on the self-injury piece, I do have adults that self-injure because of poor marriages. Like absolutely poor marriages are a trigger. Also have it because of work stress. I have some that are in the healthcare industry, and the stress that they are under, they have to have their release. And so self-injury is one of them. For the kids and divorce, that's one of the things I track in my research. And I mean, it's not saying divorce is an absolute trigger for self-injury, but I think it's how the divorce is handled becomes the risk factor for it, because divorce obviously is 100% of a kid's control. Like they have zippo say
Yeah.
in it. And feeling out of control is a trigger for self-injury. It's the thought of everyone else is calling the shots, everyone else is telling me what to do, but what I do to my own body, I've got 100% control over it.
Yeah.
So it could manifest in that way. And without a doubt, we're under more stress. I mean, it seems like every year it's just coming on more and more, and there are a lot of different reasons for it. But and I mean, that's like a whole show in of itself. Sure. Finances, lack of communication, lack of role modeling, how our society views marriage as just expendable, that we put more research into buying a new car than we do who we're going to marry. It all adds
true.
up.
That is so true. So, Lori, do you discuss these topics in your book, A Caregiver's Guide to Self-Injury?
Yes. With the book, when I wrote it, it was from the mindset of someone's reading this and they're probably in crisis. They're probably stressed out. They just found out their loved one or a friend is engaging in this behavior and they want answers quick. So it's written so that you can go directly to the chapter you need without having to read it cover to cover. Because in that moment, you just want to be able to go, answer this question for me, Lori, and boom, there it is. So been incredible feedback about it. It's a very easy to read book. It doesn't have a lot of jargon and lingo, and really try to write it based on all of the questions I would get from presentations, because I've been presenting on this topic since probably about 2000, I think. And there were consistent questions that would come up and consistent things that I saw in the self-injury support groups I did for teenage girls and the caregivers support groups and the women's support groups. That's like, okay, this is what I'm going to incorporate into the book.
In your book, you've got listed 17 do's and don'ts. Can you share some of those with us?
Yeah. So on some of the don'ts, it's don't guilt trip. Don't make accusations. Don't make assumptions. Don't make it about you. Of like, oh my gosh, if the ladies at the PTA knew that I had a child doing this, you know what? The self-injury is not about you. It's about your loved one. Or the business executive, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe my spouse is doing this. This is so embarrassing. It's not about you. So let it go. Other things would go into the, not doing let's make a deal. I've seen that mistake made very innocently, being made often, where, hey, if you just stop self-injuring, then we'll go to that concert. We'll go on that trip. You'll get that pet. And maybe they can hold out and not do it for a while. But at some point, okay, now you've gone to the concert. Now you have the pet. Now you have the piece of jewelry. Now you have the whatever. And now where's the motivation to continue not to injure if you've not addressed the core issues behind it? And that's where a lot of people do end up relapsing and going back to it. On the to-dos, I very much encourage individuals to take some of those deep breaths, to say if you don't know the answer, to give some of that space, to just listen. You don't have to provide the answers. Just the biggest thing is to just be present and listen and just say, you know what, I'm going to try and help you with this as much as I can. That, we're going to work together with this. Let me know what you need. Let's keep discussing it.
Lori, it's interesting you say just listen. I have a whole module when I'm working with couples that we spend a significant amount of time teaching them how to listen to their spouse. And it's amazing how the couples, when I follow up with them a week or so later, I always ask for nuggets. What did you learn this past week? And I had one couple who's really kind of funny. She said, well, what I got was he really can talk. You got him to talk. And his response was, well, my nugget is you got her to listen. So it's communication. That's probably 80+% of what I do when I'm working with couples. So speaking of listening and pain and so forth, we're going to take another brief commercial break, but this time we're going to be talking about LifeWave and the value of the X39 patch from LifeWave. And LifeWave is a company that's been around for almost 20 years. They're based in Southern California, and the founder of the company, David Schmidt, recognized that there is a direct correlation between light and our physical bodies. And he was able to figure out some ways to incorporate technology using some light wave therapy and treatments to help people get better. Here are a few of the things that you're going to see when it comes to improved health. You're going to have faster pain relief if you're dealing with a physical issue, faster pain relief, reduced inflammation, supporting wound healing. Mental clarity is improved, more energy and vitality, and improved appearance. These are just a few of the benefits that you have from the X39 patch from LifeWave. Here are a couple of pictures. This is a young man. He had a skiing accident. You can see because he was using his stem cell activation patches 5 days after he had his accident, you can barely tell that he had problems. Here's a man that was in a car accident, severe damage to his hand in 63 days. You can barely see the scars. There's a woman who had bunion surgery, again, in just a short amount of time. Here's a young fella, he's in his teen years. His fingertip was caught in the door, and his parents scooped up the fingertip, rushed him to the hospital, and convinced the doctors in the emergency room to actually sew the fingertip back on. And in only 2 months, he had full recovery from that injury. Here's one of my favorite ones. Here's a woman in just a few short weeks. You can see her age difference, and she looks so much younger as a result of using the stem cell patches. So this is through a company called LifeWave. They've been around again for about 20 years. And they've got some absolutely amazing technologies, not just the stem cell activation patches, but so many more things. More energy, better sleep, more revitalization. There are a lot of different benefits for this particular company. So if you'd like some more information on how to activate your stem cells and feel better, feel younger, reach out. Would love to visit with you. Ray, back to you.
Thank you, Steve. Lori, let's get Lori back on here. With all of the presentations that you've done or the people that you've worked with, what has been what was the number one question they would ask you, and what is a good takeaway for you to share with our viewing audience?
I would say if it were like a lay community, a community event, parents, caregivers, teachers, other counselors, that one of the big questions that comes up is the why. Because it really does defy logic of why would someone intentionally harm themselves. I mean, I'm an accident prone person. I should probably wear a helmet most days because I'm in my own world, focused on different projects. And so the thought of someone intentionally harming themselves, it just defies logic. And so the why is the biggest. And that's where, I mean, I started to collect the data with people I worked with. And I mean, I have 24 or 22 years of data of these are all the different reasons why. And one of the things that I try to educate individuals on is that every time someone engages in the act, it could be for a completely different reason. It can also be multiple reasons, that it could be a perfect storm of it wasn't one single situation that led to it, but there's several things building up. So it could have been, I'm angry and I'm sad and I feel guilty because I'm angry at this person. And I just needed to release all of this and have my escape. And I mean, it could be a whole culmination of things coming together. But again, it goes back to not making those assumptions that we assume we know why someone is doing what they're doing.
Lori, where does self-esteem fall into the whole picture, the whole scheme of things?
It really does have an impact because and this gets a little bit into some of the perfectionism, which I'm an expert on speaking on that topic. But those that engage in self-injury, generally speaking, don't feel that great about themselves. They don't have the greatest self-worth and self-esteem and confidence. And that goes more on some of that people-pleasing side, because we talk a lot about boundary setting, because boundaries are definitely one of the things that lead to self-injurious behaviors. But I mean, if you think about it, that's extremely counterintuitive. If you love yourself, you really feel good about yourself, you're like, yeah, I'm great. And then I'm going to go harm myself. It's too incongruent. It's like, breaks your brain to do that. So, I mean, I've rarely come across someone that if they are actively engaging in behavior, they're like, yeah, I'm a rock star. I'm feeling awesome about myself.
In my book, I kind of talked about, and Bully Victim or Hero, resources that families have, because a lot of people might not have the income that they need to get the right kind of help. But whether it's Big Brothers, Big Sisters, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, team sports or individual sports through the YMCA, anything that a child can do to help build their self-esteem. A lot of times it's trial and error. Mom or dad, that's not my thing. I don't like to do that. Well, you're going to have to keep trying different things until you see that light bulb go off. For me, it was martial arts, but that's not for everyone. But it's finding that one thing that the child can excel at and feel good about themselves. And then it's up to the parent to be aware of that and continue pushing or promoting that so that they're not even thinking about hurting themselves anymore. They're thinking about living life.
Yeah. And you bring up a really good point of that different people have different interests. And one of the things I do see as triggers is when parents are trying to live vicariously through their students, or maybe a spouse living vicariously. I mean, I see this in adult parent-child relationships too, but they want that person to be just like them or to fill the task that they wish that they were able to do, but they couldn't for some reason. And that's just so unfair, but is definitely a trigger point. And I come across that frequently of someone's like, you know what, sports isn't my thing. I'm more of an artist. I'm more of a musician, but my parent really, wants me to be in sports and I'm miserable in it.
Yeah. Lori, when I was growing up and I was in junior high and high school, I was in the band. I was a music geek all through high school and college and so forth. And I determined by watching football games that I never saw a single saxophone player tackled on the field. So Okay, saxophone is safe. I don't like pain. I do not like pain at all. So, but I know of parents that because maybe they weren't the popular kid, they weren't successful, or maybe they weren't athletic, that they put all of their stuff, and you said this earlier, one of the two of you said something about living vicariously through the kids, and then they shame the children into doing a particular activity, a sport, music, whatever it is. Maybe it's math, maybe it's science, whatever it is. And the child is revolting against that, and then they go in an opposite direction.
Yeah.
So how often is that a kind of a normal thing that you see?
It's definitely something I've encountered. It's not an anomaly. It's not a minority, like, oh, maybe 10% of the time. I think that I mean, it's a lot more common than what we think. I think there's a lot of kids that need to be in counseling. I think probably adults as well,
Yep.
adults that feel forced to do things that they're really not comfortable with. And because maybe that people pleasing is there, they just keep it stuffed.
Yep.
And one of the concerns I have, because I talk about there's different ways people deal with the anger. And the ones that I worry about are the ones that do a stuff explode. Well, the explosion seems like it's out of nowhere. And yeah, violence can definitely happen in those cases. Or the ones I'm more concerned about are the stuff implodes, and they just keep stuffing and stuffing it, and then they implode. And that's where you would see self-injury or suicide. It's, but I think that's where we have to educate individuals about communication, to your point, but also what does healthy boundary setting actually look like? And that it's okay to say no. It's okay to speak up. It's okay to change your mind. And it's fine. So there's a lot of different techniques that I use with individuals to help build up that foundation so that it's healthier. Because from a healthy foundation becomes healthy boundaries. It reduces the risk of a lot of the symptoms we see. And if you don't have the symptoms, you don't have the need for the behaviors.
I got a quick question just popped in my head. Have you looked into cultures, Middle Eastern cultures, Eastern cultures, where there's a large emphasis on, people from Europe come to the United States, poor, we had nothing, and we want our kids to have everything. And I want you to go to the best schools and see the best doctors and see, that was my family, the best, the best, the best. And it puts a lot of stress on the kid. I mean, I was always compared to my brothers, and I'm sure you've dealt with other kids that from specific cultures, there's an extra stress put on them because they have expectations of them being somebody that they might not want to be.
Yes, absolutely. And I do track different cultures, and seeking mental health in some cultures is very taboo. You keep it in the family approach, or there's a lot of derogatory terms used for seeking help of some type. There's a lot of pressure on the kid. There's also a lot of pressure on the parents to financially make all of that happen. And the kids pick up on that stress. And I've had plenty of students that said, you know what, I wish they would just let me go to public school so that they weren't so stressed out about money. And then when I get a bad grade, I feel terrible about it, like I'm wasting their money. I mean, it's just a really vicious cycle.
Wow.
But would also point out too, to dispel the belief that it's only a certain kind of kid or individual or adult that does this behavior. We tend to think, oh, well, they must be the emos or the goths, back in the day, using those terms, or they're the troubled child. And I promise you, I have had my share of individuals that come from some of the most prestigious private schools in the Dallas-Fort Worth area onto my couch. And I have had those that are cheerleaders and drill team and football players and student government, and the ones that are in the top 10%. I have had like the upper, echelon kids from a financial point of view, but also in an academic point of view. And several years ago, there's actually a study done with some of the Ivy League colleges and found that at least 17% of their students had a history of self-injury. So it sort of like blows some of these myths out of the water.
Yeah.
Wow, this is fascinating. And Lori, I know you've got enough information that we could keep going for probably another 3 or 4 hours easily. So there's a lot of information, and you've brought up a lot of things that I'm thinking about actually in my coaching practice that I work with that I can easily apply. So as we start to wrap up, is there any specific things that you wanted to wrap up with? How do we get in touch with you? I'm going to put your email back up here on the screen. Is there another way you would like people to be able to get in touch with you, specific websites? And I'll put that up as well.
Yes, there's the vannassociates.com, and that has a list of all the different resources. It has links into some of the social media for those that are interested in the self-injury part. It's going to Institute for NSSI.com, and same thing, all of the different links, resources would be on the website. Email is probably another easy route. I have a radio show on iHeartRadio, Ask the Expert, on DFW Radio 1190 AM. Actually, this Saturday, I'll have that show talking about mental health things. And then if someone is wanting training or workshops, I do a lot of business trainings. And in particular, in the last few years, I've done a lot of talks for companies on employee retention and burnout and stress management. But of course, I train on a variety of different topics. And so, yeah, have books. There's just a plethora of resources I've really wanted to make available to the community, because that's the only way we start to turn the tide on self-injury or other mental health issues for that matter.
I saw that I typed your website wrong. It's vannassociates.com. Is that where they can find most of the information?
Yes, and there's also a contact form on there too.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. Very good. Ray, anything to close us up with Lori?
Well, Lori, thank you so much. This was a very insightful interview and topic to talk about. To all our taboo talkers out there, please leave questions or comments on our Facebook page or our YouTube page. And please share the episodes with your friends, because if there's something that struck a nerve with you that can help somebody, guide them to getting healthy information so that they can come up with solutions to problems that they're struggling with, please share this with people that might need it. If you have a business and would like to be a sponsor on our show, let us know. You can reach out to Steve or myself, message us through Taboo Talk through our Facebook page, or email us at tabootalkwithRayandSteve@gmail.com. Don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe to our show so that you get the most up-to-date information possible on what we're going to be talking about next. Lori, it was a pleasure meeting you. Great to get into your head as far as how you help people. And as I'll echo what Steve said, there's a lot that I've personally learned that I could use for my clients as well. So thank you for sharing, and hopefully we can bring you back, because we both know that you've got so much more to offer.
Well, thank you for this opportunity and spreading awareness.
Lori, thank you again. We appreciate your being with us. And this is all the time we've got for Taboo Talk with Ray and Steve this week. As Ray said, make sure you like, share, comment, and subscribe to our sites, both on Facebook Live as well as on YouTube. So look forward to seeing you guys next week, same time, 1:30 Central Time on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. Folks, we'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.